Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is executive coach and leadership strategies. No other than Miss Kathryn Booker-Veloz.
Hi, Daniel.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Kathryn. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes, so hi, everyone. My name is Kathryn Booker-Veloz, and I'm an executive coach and leadership strategist. So I have founded a company titled the Influence Leadership Lab, coaching and consulting, building off of nearly almost 10 years of experience coaching U.S. diplomats and the top senior leaders, both in the federal government and beyond. And so it's a real privilege and pleasure to be able to come to you all today to share more about some important topics that leaders often, tend to struggle with.
Indeed, Miss Kathryn, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world and to empowering us and for our future leader. So tell us how to build emotional intelligent people-centered teams without burning out.
Yeah, so I really like to break this down into three practical kind of tools, if you will. So I want to start by, leading with emotional intelligence is a strategy, not pain. Some people think no pain, no gain. And while that may be true in some cases, for the purposes of enhancing your workplace culture, building trust, fostering greater cohesion, you really need to have emotional intelligence strategies and tools that can help you get to that other side. The second thing I also want to highlight and touch on is, people centered doesn't mean people pleasing. And people often, conflate the two or get them confused, but people pleasing does not mean people centered. And then the third thing I wanted to highlight is, burnout happens when leaders are performing, not leading. And so I'm happy to dig into, what does it mean to delegate, put up boundaries in order for you as a senior leader to be able to lead with more brain space, more authority, less stress, and with greater clarity of mind. And so I really love Daniel Goleman's definition of emotional intelligence. I also want to highlight that emotional intelligence is different from, um, the IQ, right? So whereas IQ, right, our intelligence is set in stone, emotional intelligence, some people shorten it to EI or EQ, it can be it can be grown and practiced over a long period of time. And so Daniel Goleman, he was a New York Times reporter back in 1990s, late 1990s, and he took the research of Yale researchers and professors who were looking into this idea of emotional intelligence. And what he ended up finding, and he later kind of rebranded it in 2002, was that emotional intelligence can be broken down into 4 to 5 domains, if you will. So the first one is self awareness, right? That is the willingness to recognize our emotions and the impact that they have on people and others around us, and even ourselves. Then you also have self awareness, which is the ability to understand emotions, especially whenever making decisions. Then you also have self management, which is really about how we manage and how we redirect disruptive emotions, right? If someone makes us angry, if we get bad news, how are we able to self manage, or in other words, self regulate to come to a state of peace, or just kind of a level setting, if you will, to make a wise decision instead of an impulsive decision. Then Daniel Goleman also talks about relationship management. And this one is so key because this one touches on influence, how we interact with people, build teams, foster cohesion. This is the ability to achieve beyond expectations and have clear vision and clear purpose for both yourself and the people that you lead around you.
Very well said, Miss Catherine. Beautifully articulated. How can how can leaders model emotional intelligence to cultivate a psychological safe people first team environment?
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned psychological safety, Daniel, because psychological safety and emotional intelligence are directly intertwined. Although they're not the same, they are definitely intertwined. And so, we know psychological safety, as Amy Edmondson, or a Harvard professor, has noted, as having the ability to take risks, to, risk failure, to dust yourself back off and get back up again and try again with creativity and innovation. But the only way that a team is able to get to that level, or an organization is able to get to that level, is having the building blocks of emotional intelligence. And so, emotional intelligence is, again, having that self awareness. What does it mean to be empathetic? And I love Dr. Brene Brown. She's actually an author of several books, but one of my favorites in particular is Dare to Lead, which is specifically for your top C suite executive leaders and even middle managers, but leaders in general. It's a fantastic book that I encourage everyone to read. But what Brene Brown says in her book is that empathy is having the ability to identify with the emotion that that other person is experiencing. You're not able, no one's ever really able to walk in someone else's shoes. However, having that ability to identify with the emotion is very powerful. And that is also a key ingredient, if you will, to creating and cultivating more emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence also is, emotional self-awareness. So let's say, for example, for leaders, that you show up to work, or you're on your way to work. Let's imagine this for a moment. You're on your way to work, you're in a great mood, you maybe took the metro or you drove in, right? But you're just in a happy, positive mood, like nothing can stop you, like the world is your oyster, everything is good and dandy. Then you show up to the office, and let's say one of your subordinates provides some shocking news about, maybe you didn't reach your quarter sales, or there was a bad report, or maybe a report wasn't even submitted that needed to get done ASAP. And I just want to ask folks who are listening, what do you do in that moment? Like, what are you beginning to feel within your own body that is beginning to happen? Like, some people may get, hot in the face, right? They may get red. They may, their stomach may drop, if you will. Maybe they get, dry mouth because of all of this negative information that you're getting. Emotional intelligence is having the ability to pause, take a step back, and make a calculated choice on how you're going to choose to respond to that employee who brought you that bad news. Because let's remember, right? We just talked about empathy. Try to try to think about the employee who brought you the bad news, what they may be feeling. Surely maybe terror because you're the big boss, or you're, the manager of the team, director. They may be feeling terror, fear of getting fired, fear of, um, you know, being demoted, right? There are innumerable amount of, feelings that could be running through that individual's minds. But you, on the other side of that equation, what's your response going to be? There is so much influence and power that you have by determining how you're going to respond. And so, again, emotional intelligence is having that ability to pause, take a step back, process the information that was just provided to you, and choose if you're going to respond in a way that is condescending, passive aggressive, angry, yelling, lashing out, or you deciding to say, that is unfortunate news. How can we fix this? Let's get creative, let's get scrappy as a team. Maybe you tell that subordinate to, go back to their team and figure out maybe some solutions to kind of lessen the impact. Or, also having an honest conversation to the person that C-suite leader is reporting up to, right? Maybe an administrator, if you will, and saying, okay, the ball was dropped here. But these are some practical tools that our team has come up with that can help us get around and get to that other side. And so, you know, I want to just say that emotional intelligence, it makes or breaks teams, it makes or breaks marriages, friendships, any sort of relationship, because it is so critical to our shared humanity, right? How you show up. We have the power to speak life or death, as they say. It's in the tongue, right? We can all remember a negative experience where someone, let's zoom out of the workplace, but just maybe if you're in the grocery store and someone talked to you in a very poor way, how did that make you feel? It oftentimes shifts your entire day from just that one negative experience. And on the contrary, having people speak life, right? Whether it's a compliment or an affirmation, they're validating you, they see you, they're recognizing a gifting maybe that you have. And that also has the power to change and positively impact how we show up or, go about the rest of our day.
Indeed, People and Dare to Lead by Brené Brown is highly recommended. Miss
Yes.
Catherine, how can organizations embed emotional intelligence into their core values and daily practices?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. And it's one that I've actually helped a lot of C suite leaders with, especially last year and the years prior. But it's really operationalizing the behaviors of emotional intelligence. And so, what I like to say is, whether it's an assessment, right? There's various assessments that are out there on emotional intelligence. But looking at, for example, regarding self-awareness, we're going to break it down into practical behaviors that are you can take action on immediately, right? Let's talk about, having the ability to recognize how your emotions impact others. There are statistics and data that is out there. I believe it was done by MIT and other institutions that said that when a leader walks into the room, if they're in a bad mood, everyone else begins to mirror that behavior that that leader is exhibiting, whether they want it to or not. It is just how we as humans relate. We're interconnected. If a leader comes in angry, they throw their fist down on the table, it's just really short and really a lot of quips, everyone begins to react that same way. Whereas when a leader comes in, upbeat, positive, happy, everyone is like they're it's like, oh, we can take a breath. Okay, it's fine. And there's more jokes that are being exchanged, perhaps, or, just more lightheartedness that's being introduced. But one of the ways that they can do this for organizations that want to operationalize emotional intelligence is I would encourage you all to do a self assessment where you go through the five real kind of domains of emotional intelligence and first score yourself, right? Because before we can change the organization, we first need to be self reflective and look at how we're doing ourselves personally. So there's actually something that I've created, and I can offer it, free guide around, how to just do an assessment on emotional intelligence, but very simple, right? For the self regulation category, remain calm under pressure, right? Rate yourself from a 1 to 5 uh, for self regulation. You remain calm under pressure. 1 being no, 5 being absolutely, and then 2, 3, 4 in between, right? Then go to the next question. I pause before reacting emotionally, right? Again, score yourself from 1 to 5, right? 5 being yes, you do it absolutely, and 1 being actually I'm horrible at this. I need to do some work. And I would also, so in addition to doing the self assessment, I would also encourage teams to get with your monitoring, evaluation, and learning, specialists, your data people, and really help you all create metrics that are, reflective of your organization and that break down, these emotional intelligence skills and tools, in practical, measurable ways. Because I want to say the data is out there, the research is out there. Emotional intelligence can absolutely be measured, right? But you need to make sure that you're working with the right folks to help ensure that it's targeted questions that you're asking, and targeted behaviors that you're wanting your team to adapt to. Another thing I would also say is in terms of, you know, including more emotional intelligent behaviors in the workplace. Um, do you pause before you react or respond to someone? Right? That's one
Right.
behavior that you can intentionally practice. Do you just blow up immediately and just go off on the rim? Another behavior regarding self-awareness. Do Whenever you have your one-on-ones with your teams, with your subordinates, during those one-on-ones, are you distracted and busy responding to a million and one emails? Or are you taking the time to kind of blot out everything else and just zero in on this 30-minute, 15-minute one on one with this individual, right? That's active listening. Active listening is crucial to any organization because it has the power to create this feeling within individuals, within humans, not AI robots, but humans, this sense of validation, feeling seen, feeling heard, and feeling that their work actually matters. And I know that probably like some antennas maybe went up for some folks because I understand firsthand. I was the youngest member on my C suite leadership team. And I remember seeing firsthand, especially working under political appointees, that you all have a ton of work and you're being pulled in so many different directions. But I would say what is so critical and so powerful is having that moment to pause, zone in with someone, listen to what they have to say. Because on the other side, again, looking at empathy, that subordinate who's coming to you, reporting out or updating you on what they have for the week, has put in just as much effort, oftentimes, into ensuring that they have provided the information that's going to be satisfying and helpful to the organization more broadly. Yeah.
Indeed, Miss Catherine, as a executive coach and leadership strategies, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
So I would say my short term goals are to get out there and help as many people as I possibly can. Like I said, I got my first six-figure job at the age of 25, working in a very high level organization within the federal government here in the United States, and was promoted about a year and a half later to a C suite leadership level. I was the youngest member on my team, advising the top most senior leaders, US diplomats. I've coached over 300 executives and leaders within my organization and beyond. And so I think just short term, wanting to take all of that, compounded experience and provide it as a tool and a resource to those who are in need. Because one thing that I saw first and foremost, Daniel, is that leading is hard.
Yes, true.
Leading is it can sometimes feel lonely, it can sometimes feel isolating, and sometimes people hide all of that behind their quote unquote polished titles. But the reality is they are human just like everybody else, and they have doubts and they have insecurities. And so having the ability to coach folks through 6 months of coaching or what have you, or their teams, is something that I'm definitely looking forward to in the next short term. And then long term, I think it is continuing to scale, of course, but my heart is really with helping people. Like, I strongly believe in servant leadership, a people centered approach first and foremost, right? As I mentioned before, it's not people pleasing. We're bending and we're trying to be quote unquote nice, but having honest, hard conversations with kindness, because we can be kind even though it may not feel good. You can still be respectful and treat people with dignity, but wanting to incorporate all of that and just continue to scale, um, especially reaching to different cultures and countries. I worked in several countries in the Asia region, and so just wanting to get out there and help as much as I can, short term and long term. Yeah.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Catherine, and looking forward for more success. And what challenges arise when aligning task-oriented goals with people-centered priorities and how they can be navigated?
Yeah, I think some people think it's one or the other, right? But I think, and I will say, just I'll tell a quick story, Daniel, just right off the bat that comes to mind. I remember in my C-suite role, um, there was a leader who was there who was rewarded and celebrated for their technical expertise. However, the people side was lacking significantly. And it was to the point where there were at least, 10 plus people who had not the best interactions with this individual, but it seemed like their behavior was constantly being rewarded because of their technical expertise. And so I want to say and just remind folks that it's not one or the other, right? You can still have the technical expertise, right? And build up a team that is aligned with the values that you are holding your organization to or your team to. And I also want to again give a shout out to Dr. Brene Brown because her book is riddled with different. She actually has a workbook that goes along with that book on how to operationalize Dare to Lead. And there's different exercises that can be facilitated with either a facilitator or with someone on the team who's able to walk you all through values. Right? What are the values of the team? What are you all really gonna hold yourselves to, or what are you not gonna do? But I want to just say that it's not either or, but it's both and. Because to have a high performing team, the only way to really extract the goal from that team is having the tools and the skills to know how to relate to the people, how to connect, how to listen actively, how to ask more questions than just about work, but how to see them as a whole human. And I think you're especially seeing this more and more with Gen Z, with millennials, of course. And it's kind of becoming to permeate the workplace as a whole, where people are wanting to see more humans. And so having the time to invest in training, invest in assessments, invest in the hard work that's needed to ensure that the people part is there while you're also continuing to build and massage those technical skills, because I want to just reiterate again because it comes up so often. I've heard it throughout my career. You can have expertise and develop people leaders and provide feedback, right? Because feedback is also going to be critical as you're molding people into this more people centered approach, especially if they're more leaning on the high technical skills. So that's what I would say just in the first hand, just right off the bat.
Very well said, Miss Kathryn. Very well said. Before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, book 101 review in fifth season, and comedy 101 in second season, food 101 in its fifth season too, geography 101 and love letters in third season, and my baby podcast, Mental Health 101, movie 101 review and music 101 in its fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season too. So please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So Miss Catherine, how can a culture of a continuous learning adapt to evolving emotional and workload demands?
Yeah. So I would say it is so critical to invest in people, and it is so critical to take the time and put the resources right to help develop that even further. As I mentioned before, you know, people centered doesn't mean people pleasing, right? That
Yes.
there's no need to over function or overwork or try to bend to every whip or whim of every individual person. But having a people centered approach means that you're showing up to lead with values, validate, encourage people, and help foster greater cohesion through giving shout outs or just recognizing that people, before they are an employee, they're a human being, and they're worthy of dignity and respect and feeling included, whether they're an entry level employee or they're at the very top, in the C suite, arena. Everyone, if you really want to set your teams apart, it is having the ability to find commonalities that you have with the people. You're right. When you're in conversation, maybe walk around your workplace or have coffee chats or tea chats if you're working virtually, but have the moment to connect with people and try to remember something. Write it down, but remember something about that individual so that the next time you connect and the opportunity presents itself, you're able to reflect back, and people just naturally are like, oh wow, they remember that. I had no clue. I had no idea that they knew I got married, for example. There was a top US diplomat who remembered that I got married. And I just was just so shocked about that because, of course, he's so busy. They're so busy with so many other things. But that just really made me feel more connected to the team and to the mission and showed me that I'm valued here. And so I don't want to folks to think you have to be people centered or you have to choose between being productive. The production and the productivity and the excellence comes from mastering those people skill sets and that competency as a leader.
Miss Kathryn Booker-Veloz, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your business itself?
Yeah, so I will just say thank you, Daniel, for this opportunity. But I just want to say I've spent the last decade plus, supporting senior leaders and leaders of all kinds, back from when I served in the U.S. Peace Corps to, joining the federal government and working in an international organization, traveling to over 20 plus countries at a young age. So, I'm really excited to take all of these lived experiences and really provide practical tools that can help transform leaders and their organizations. So, if there's interest, please feel free to sign up. I have a free guide, a letter to leaders, titled "It's Not Lonely at the Top When You Have the Right People with You." And I'd love to, strike up more conversations with folks. But thank you again, Daniel.
You are most welcome, Miss Katrina. You are willing to come back over on Book 101 Review, and let's talk about more and more about emotional or leadership strategies. Yes, people, let's support Miss Katrina Booker-Veloz, because if you support her, more and more and more empowering coaching to come. So, Miss Catherine, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone.
More to come, people. See you soon.